Kale Varn's fourth set of tentacles twitched anxiously as they sifted through the disorganized archive records of the Galactic Coalition's Xenoanthropological Department. As the newest and most junior member, they were often left with the tedious tasks, those that no one else wanted to touch. Sorting through centuries of outdated reports about various alien species was one of those tasks. "Why do we still keep these paper records?" Kale muttered, their translucent carapace catching the faint glow of the overhead lights. "We're part of an intergalactic alliance spanning thousands of light years, yet here I am, shuffling physical documents like some ancient scholar." The thought slipped away as Kale's eyes fell on a file that piqued their curiosity. Its label read simply, "Human Species, Threat Assessment," but what caught their attention was the file's security classification, Ultra Red Plus. Kale had never even heard of that level of security clearance before. "That can't be right," Kale murmured to the empty room. "Humans are barely a Class 3 species in terms of technological development. They haven't even properly colonized their own solar system." Still, their curiosity got the better of them. What harm could come from reviewing the assessment of a species that still believed faster-than-light travel was more fantasy than science? Kale broke the seal and, as the file projected a holographic display, an urgent warning flashed across the screen. "Warning, Species Threat Assessment, Maximum Danger. Approach with extreme caution. Direct contact discouraged. Colonization prohibited. Containment protocols in effect." Kale let out a short laugh, their carapace vibrating with amusement. "This has to be a joke. Probably one of those pranks from the Temporal Affairs team." But as they dug deeper into the file, Kale's amusement quickly morphed into confusion and concern. The documentation was exhaustive, spanning centuries of covert observations. The report was signed by High Commander Zothar, one of the most decorated military strategists of the last millennium. "This makes no sense," Kale muttered under their breath, their two secondary brains struggling to comprehend what they were reading. According to the report, humans were ranked as a greater threat than the Swarm Collective, a race known for consuming entire planets. Kale pulled up the comparative species analysis. Humans, by all measurable metrics, seemed unimpressive. They lacked natural weaponry like the Draith, who wielded plasma-enhanced glands. They didn't regenerate like the Morliths, nor did they possess any psychic abilities, unlike the majority of spacefaring civilizations. Yet there it was, in cold, official Galactic Coalition documentation, humans were classified as the most dangerous species currently known to exist. The professional curiosity Kale had once felt grew into full-blown obsession. As a xenologist, they had been trained to study and classify species based on their behaviors and characteristics. There had to be a logical explanation for this classification. But before Kale could delve further into the file, a flashing message interrupted their research. "Junior Researcher Kale Varn, please report to Senior Administrator Vish Shah immediately." Perfect timing, as always, Kale grumbled, carefully sealing the file again. But they made a mental note of its location. This mystery was far too intriguing to ignore. As they made their way to Senior Administrator Vish's office, Kale couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. These humans still used combustion engines in some of their vehicles. What could possibly make them more dangerous than species that could manipulate spacetime? Little did Kale know, they were about to embark on a journey that would completely alter their understanding of what truly made a species dangerous, and it had nothing to do with advanced technology or natural weaponry. After their meeting with Senior Administrator Visha, which turned out to be little more than a lecture on proper archive maintenance, Kale returned to the classified files. This time, they pulled up the records from the first contact between humans and the Draith Empire. Their carapace almost shattered with disbelief as they reviewed the data. No, this can't be right," Kale muttered, double-checking the information. The Draith, known for their technologically advanced warfare and formidable military culture, had retreated during an attempted surprise invasion of a human research station on the moon. The report detailed how the Draith, expecting an easy victory, were caught off guard by one human, a maintenance engineer named Dr. Lila Rome. Dr. Roan had been repairing the station's water system when the Draith breached the airlock. What the Draith hadn't anticipated was the humans' quick thinking. Dr. Roan, with nothing but basic cleaning supplies, created chemical weapons and smoke bombs that dissolved through the Draith's battle armor. But that wasn't even the most disturbing part. Dr. Roan had then taken the station's standard repair tools, wrenches, and even a vacuum hose, and converted them into projectile weapons. Kale's tentacles shook as they read on. Dr. Roan continued to modify standard equipment, including using compressed air canisters as propulsion devices for wrenches. "What is this?" Kale exclaimed. "These humans can turn anything into a weapon." The report went on to describe several other instances of humans surviving in situations that would have obliterated other species. There was a woman who survived in the vacuum of space for over 80 seconds without suffering permanent damage. A man who kept fighting despite losing massive amounts of blood. Even a group of humans who survived for weeks in a damaged mining facility on Mars, using nothing but scraps and their ingenuity to stay alive. They recycled their own waste to grow food? Kale asked in disbelief, reading about how humans had adapted algae and spare parts to create a hydroponic garden. That's not survival. That's defying nature itself. But the report that truly froze Kale's neural pathways was the infamous office supplies incident. During a diplomatic meeting between humans and Draith, 3 Draith warriors, offended by a perceived insult, tried to teach a human junior diplomat a lesson. The human, Chuck Flanders, had been armed with nothing but office supplies. He had used adhesive strips to bind the warriors, rubber bands to blind them, and document fasteners as restraints. He even turned his desk chair into a battering ram. Kale's tentacles trembled as they read the final report. Flanders had single-handedly defeated 3 armed Draith warriors using only objects designed for organizing paperwork. Even more disturbing, the footage showed Flanders laughing throughout the entire encounter. As Kale reviewed the supplementary psychological analysis, they began to understand. The report suggested that humans were not only survivors, they were relentless problem solvers, adaptable to an almost illogical degree. When faced with impossible challenges, they did not yield. They improvised, they adapted, and they overcame. Humans, Kale muttered, they enjoy it. They enjoy the struggle, the problem solving, the improvisation. That's what makes them so dangerous. The Draith, one of the most fearsome military powers in the galaxy, had revised their entire protocol for dealing with humans. In fact, they had introduced a new directive: destroy all nearby objects, regardless of apparent harmlessness, in case of human encounter. Kale sat back, their mind racing. The more they uncovered, the more they understood. Humans didn't just use tools, they redefined the very concept of what a tool could be. They didn't just adapt to survive, they bent the universe itself to their will. Through sheer determination. "Computer," Kale asked, their voice trembling, "how many ordinary objects within my reach could humans weaponize?" The computer paused before responding, analysis incomplete. Humans have demonstrated the ability to weaponize any object with mass or chemical properties. Recommendation: do not allow humans access to any objects. Kale looked down at their data tablet, then slowly placed it back on the desk. The more they learned about humanity, the more their perspective shifted. These humans had earned their Ultra-Red Plus classification, and Kale had a feeling they were only scratching the surface of just how terrifying that truly was. For the next few days, Rell found it impossible to shake the image of the human child trying to fit the square block through the circular hole. The simplicity of the task and the sheer persistence of the child haunted them. Humans didn't just try until they succeeded, they didn't even seem to accept failure as an option. They would reshape their understanding, reframe their approach, and keep going until they achieved their goal. And often, their solution was one that no other species would have thought of. Now, Rell sat in their small office, the flickering hologram of the case study still visible in front of them. Despite their initial shock, a curious thought had begun to take root in their mind. What made these creatures so different? Humans weren't the strongest species. They didn't wield powerful natural abilities or exotic technologies. And yet, it was undeniable that they had something that no one else seemed to have: the ability to overcome anything. Their adaptability. Their sheer bloody-mindedness. A buzzing sound pulled Rell from their thoughts. A message flashed on the screen: report to Senior Officer Thrax immediately. Rell sighed. They were already far behind schedule on their analysis, but it was probably better to face the senior officer's growing impatience head-on. Maybe the higher-ups knew something they didn't. Perhaps it was time to put their questions to rest. Senior Officer Thrax was a towering figure, his form composed of muscular plating, with multiple sets of glowing eyes and a voice like gravel scraping against metal. He looked every bit the military officer, and yet Rell had learned long ago that Thrax's temper was as volatile as his appearance. Still, despite the undeniable tension between them, Rell had always respected the officer's pragmatic approach. As Rell entered the chamber, Thrax's gaze didn't leave the holographic display he was studying. The room was dim, a single light casting long shadows on the walls, highlighting the sharp angles of the officer's features. "Rell," Thrax said, his tone devoid of warmth. "I hope you finally found the answer you're looking for." "I've been reviewing the human data extensively," Rell replied, their voice steady despite the swirling unease in their gut. I think there's something we've missed." Thrax's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "There's more to them than just survival tactics. Their intelligence, how they approach problems, it's like nothing I've seen before. They don't just solve problems, Thrax. They transform them. They take the impossible and find a way through it, not through strength or numbers, but by sheer will and creativity." Thrax leaned back, arms folded. "You're telling me that you're afraid of a species that can barely handle their own space travel?" Rell hesitated, gathering their thoughts. "I'm telling you that their way of thinking is a danger to us. They don't think like the rest of the galaxy. And that, Thrax, is what makes them terrifying." A long silence passed, as Thrax regarded Rell with something close to amusement. "I fail to see how creativity can be dangerous. It's hardly an unprecedented trait." "No, but it's the manner in which they use it," Rell replied, their voice taking on a more urgent tone. "They don't just adapt to their environment, Thrax. They manipulate it. They bend the laws of nature, reality itself, to suit their needs. They don't accept that something can't be done. They don't give up. They find ways to break the system, no matter how it fights back." Thrax's face shifted, the weight of Rell's words sinking in. "You're saying that their persistence, their unwillingness to accept limits, makes them dangerous?" Rell nodded. "Yes. It's not just that they survive, it's that they refuse to accept defeat in ways no other species would even consider. We might dismiss it now, but think about it. They created weapons from ordinary objects. They modified tools into deadly devices. They survived against impossible odds, not because they were the strongest, but because they adapted, reinvented, and kept fighting. That's a level of unpredictability we haven't seen in any species." Thrax's jaw tightened. "So, you're asking me to believe that a species like this could pose a real threat to us? A species that is so far behind technologically?" "I'm not asking you to believe it, Thrax," Rell replied, their voice tinged with frustration. "I'm showing you the evidence. And if we ignore it, we may not just be facing a new species, we could be facing an existential threat that we're entirely unprepared for." Thrax stood abruptly, his presence filling the room. "You may be right, Rell. But I need more than just your word. If humans are truly as dangerous as you claim, we need proof. Real, undeniable proof. Find me something definitive. Or I'll consider this nothing more than paranoia." Rell nodded. "Understood, sir." Rell left Thrax's office with the weight of the senior officer's words hanging over them. The path ahead was clear, they needed to dig deeper. To find that one, irrefutable piece of evidence that would finally convince the galaxy just how dangerous humans truly were. As they walked through the corridors of the research facility, Rell's mind was a whirlpool of thoughts. Humans had something that no other species did, a unique kind of resilience. They didn't give up. They didn't just survive. They thrived. And it was that unrelenting drive that made them a force the galaxy had yet to fully comprehend. They had one more place to look. Rell's next destination was the oldest and most secretive archive in the entire Council, a vast vault of records buried deep within the Council's most secure facility. The vault contained the earliest encounters with humanity, records from the first contact, and the numerous unexplained events that followed. It was here, Rell hoped, that they might find what was needed to shift the entire perception of humanity from a primitive species to something far more dangerous. With every step toward the vault, Rell's heart quickened. It felt like they were on the verge of uncovering something massive, something that would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. It wasn't just the humans themselves. It was the way they had changed the very rules of survival and combat. Rell was about to uncover the most terrifying thing the galaxy had ever seen, a species that didn't fear failure, only the challenge of the impossible. The vault doors loomed ahead. And inside, Rell hoped to find the proof they needed to stop the galaxy from underestimating the one species that, perhaps more than any other, truly deserved the classification of Ultra-Red Plus. The heavy doors of the vault slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing the darkened depths beyond. A cold, metallic scent clung to the air, mingling with the sterile silence. Rell stepped into the vast chamber, their pulse quickening. They had never been inside this vault before. It was a place shrouded in mystery, where only the highest-ranking officers and select researchers were allowed access. A place where the most dangerous, and most significant, information was kept hidden. Rell's fingers brushed the controls at their side, activating a light panel that cast a soft glow over the walls. Rows of data crystals lined the shelves, each one containing the carefully catalogued history of humanity's interactions with the galactic community. These records, classified and often forgotten by most, were key to understanding what made humans so different. The first data crystal Rell pulled from the shelf was a record from the early days of First Contact, Human Encounter 3421. They inserted it into the terminal, waiting as the data streamed onto the screen. The image flickered briefly, then stabilized, a grainy video of the first human explorers meeting the members of a nearby alien species, the Zerk. The Zerk were known for their advanced technology, their deep space exploration capabilities, and their intellectual prowess. Yet, despite their superiority in nearly every field, they were completely unprepared for what happened next. The video showed the Zerk extending their hand in greeting, an alien gesture of peace, to the small crew of humans aboard a newly discovered planet. What followed was unlike anything Rell had ever seen before. The human captain, a woman with short-cropped hair and an almost unnerving calm, stood silently for a moment, studying the Zerk before her. Then, without warning, she extended her hand, not to shake, but to grab one of the Zerk's delicate communication devices, which was held on a slender arm. The Zerk reacted instantly, their eyes widening in confusion and alarm. Their kind had never known an interaction like this, one where a foreign species blatantly disregarded established protocols of diplomacy. The humans, however, seemed unfazed. "We don't need the translator," the captain had said, her voice calm but firm. "I'll learn your language on my own." Rell paused the video, staring at the screen. What they had just seen wasn't just an act of defiance, it was an act of audacity. The human captain hadn't just breached protocol, she had challenged the entire foundation of the Zerk's belief system. The Zerk were meticulous, careful, and respected boundaries. And yet here was a human, offering nothing but an open challenge to that respect. It wasn't a physical confrontation. No violence was involved. But it was a confrontation of ideas, of principles. The human didn't ask for permission to interact with the Zerk, she simply took what she needed and expected the Zerk to adapt to her. And they did. Slowly, the Zerk gave in to her persistence, eventually allowing her to learn their language, thus avoiding a potential diplomatic crisis. But the incident lingered in the minds of the Zerk as one of their greatest embarrassments. Rell's thoughts raced. This wasn't an isolated event. They'd read about similar incidents in the past, all throughout humanity's rise. Humans didn't just engage with others, they forced others to engage with them, often by simply bending the circumstances to their will. As Rell moved on to the next crystal, the weight of what they were uncovering began to sink in. Every record, every story, pointed to the same disturbing truth: humans didn't understand limits in the way other species did. They didn't see barriers, they saw challenges to be overcome. It was an unrelenting drive to survive, to adapt, to win that had carried them from their home planet to the far reaches of space. The next crystal contained an even more disturbing set of data, a series of encounters with a species called the Darvik, a proud race of warriors known for their brutal, no-nonsense approach to combat. The Darvik had invaded a colony on the human-controlled planet Korea. The humans, vastly outnumbered, should have been annihilated. And yet, somehow, they had repelled the invasion. The battle had been quick, brutal, and strangely methodical. The Darvik had assumed they would crush the human forces easily. But the humans fought back with an intensity and ingenuity that the Darvik had not anticipated. They used guerrilla tactics, setting traps, and modifying their environment in ways that threw the Darvik off balance. It was as if the humans had studied the Darvik's fighting styles and developed countermeasures before the first shot was even fired. And then there was the final, most chilling part of the report. After the battle, the surviving Darvik warriors had tried to regain their honor by challenging the humans to single combat, a tradition in their culture. They believed that victory in such a challenge would restore their pride and dignity. The humans, of course, accepted. But instead of sending their strongest fighter, they sent a single soldier, a woman who had no experience in combat beyond basic training. The Darvik warriors, arrogantly confident, underestimated her. She fought with a cold, almost scientific precision. It wasn't strength that won the battle, but her ability to read her opponent, to use their own momentum against them. She wasn't the best fighter in terms of sheer skill, but she was an unstoppable force because she refused to accept failure. When it was over, the Darvik warriors lay defeated, humiliated in front of his people. The message was clear: no matter the odds, the humans could not be beaten. Rell's fingers trembled as they fast-forwarded through the report, seeing more instances of humans applying the same relentless persistence, against the odds, against all logic. They weren't just surviving, they were reshaping every conflict they encountered to their advantage. Rell's mind reeled. The galaxy had long underestimated humanity. It wasn't their technology or strength that made them dangerous, it was their mindset. They would never accept failure, never accept the status quo. They would always push forward, adapt, and find a way. And if humanity ever realized that there was nothing standing between them and true power in the galaxy, they would change the entire balance of the universe. The thought of that kind of potential, unchecked, was terrifying. Rell stepped back from the terminal, their thoughts churning. They had seen enough. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity wasn't just a threat, they were a force of nature, capable of reshaping the galaxy in ways no one else could even begin to comprehend. But what could they do? Thrax had demanded proof, and now Rell had it. But how could they make the galaxy listen? Would they even believe it? Or would they dismiss it as paranoia, as they had before? Rell knew one thing for certain: the next steps were crucial. If they didn't act now, humanity's rise could be unstoppable. The stakes had never been higher. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Rell left the vault, the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on their shoulders. They had uncovered the truth. Now, the only question was, what would they do with it? Rell stood before the large window of their quarters, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars stretched in every direction, a shimmering sea of possibilities, each one a potential future. The cold, unfeeling expanse seemed to mock their current state, so many unknowns, so many risks. Yet here they were, standing on the edge of a precipice. The information they had uncovered in the vault was the key to everything, and yet, it felt like a curse. They ran their fingers along the smooth surface of the console at their side, activating the comm system. Thrax's image blinked to life on the screen, the cold steel of their face giving nothing away. Report. Thrax's voice was clipped, expectant. Rell hesitated for a moment, the gravity of the situation settling deeper into their bones. It's worse than I thought, they began, their voice low. Humans aren't just surviving, they're evolving faster than we can keep up. They adapt, overcome, and take control in ways no other species can. Their persistence is their weapon. And it's terrifying. Thrax's brow furrowed, though their face remained impassive. Details. Rell nodded, scrolling through the data they had accumulated. The patterns were undeniable now. Every encounter humanity had with a new species, every battle, every negotiation, it all pointed to the same conclusion: humans did not play by the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. While others might bend or break under pressure, humans found a way to not only endure but to emerge victorious, often leaving a wake of shattered alliances and ruined reputations. I've reviewed the records. The Zerk incident, the Darvik defeat, it's not an anomaly, Thrax. It's a pattern. They don't just interact with other species. They force them to adjust. They change the entire dynamic of whatever they touch. And they do it without hesitation. It's as if they believe they are entitled to reshape everything. Thrax's eyes narrowed, considering Rell's words. Entitled? They are a young species, ambitious, yes, but they haven't earned the right to upend the established order. That's exactly the point, Rell said, their voice growing more urgent. They don't care about the established order. They don't even see it as a challenge. They're used to bending things to their will, and that's what makes them dangerous. They're driven by a need for control, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to achieve it. A long silence followed, as if Thrax was calculating the weight of the revelation. Finally, they spoke again, their voice colder than before. And what would you suggest we do about it? Their rise has been fast, yes, but it's still relatively contained. We still have time. Rell clenched their fists. Time is the one thing we don't have. If we wait any longer, it'll be too late. They've already infiltrated multiple sectors of the galaxy. And now they're beginning to make waves in the neutral zone, territory that was once considered neutral, but no longer. They're slowly pulling in allies, manipulating existing tensions to their advantage. If we don't act soon, they'll be entrenched, and it will be impossible to dislodge them. Thrax looked away, their gaze distant. For a moment, Rell could almost feel the weight of the decision they were grappling with. The galaxy had always been fragile, held together by fragile alliances and tenuous peace. The rise of humanity could unravel it all, and yet, there was something about their expansion that was undeniable. Their potential was enormous. We cannot simply wipe them out, Thrax said, their voice now a sharp edge. That would provoke a war we can't afford. But neither can we allow them to dominate without resistance. Rell felt a surge of frustration. So what then? What do you propose? Do we just watch as they grow stronger, hoping they'll stop? Thrax's gaze returned to Rell, their expression calculating. No. We begin to undermine them. Subtlety will be our weapon. There are fractures in their society, flaws that we can exploit. They are divided in ways we can capitalize on. We need to sow discord, to create doubt. They're still a young species, uncertain about their place in the galaxy. If we can exploit that. Rell interrupted, their voice urgent. You don't understand. This is beyond manipulation, Thrax. They're more than just a threat to the status quo, they're a fundamental disruption. You're thinking too small. Thrax's lip curled into a faint sneer. And you're thinking too emotionally. We will not launch a full-scale attack. We must proceed with caution. But Rell shook their head, their mind racing. They'd seen what humanity was capable of firsthand. They had lived through the small skirmishes, the subtle influence, and now the galaxy was beginning to feel the pull of their relentless drive. Every move they made was calculated, every step deliberate. They weren't simply playing the game, they were reshaping the rules entirely. Rell exhaled slowly, the weight of the decision pressing down. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Fine. I'll do what needs to be done. But make no mistake, Thrax, humanity will not stop unless we stop them. It's only a matter of time before they turn their eyes to us. Thrax gave a nod, the cold gleam in their eyes sharpening. We will make them realize their place in the galaxy. And if they won't listen, well, we'll make them understand. The connection ended abruptly, leaving Rell in the quiet of their quarters, alone with their thoughts. The plans were set in motion now. The galaxy would either adapt or fall to the unstoppable force that was humanity. As Rell turned to leave, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the edge of something far more catastrophic than they could fully comprehend. Humanity's rise had begun with whispers. But those whispers were now growing louder. And soon, they would become a roar. The darkened room hummed with the quiet energy of the strategist's table, a cavernous space filled with holographic projections of star systems, routes, and tactical points. Rell stood at its head, surrounded by a handful of the galaxy's most powerful leaders, each of them silently contemplating the fate of the future. The faces around them were serious, each one wearing the heavy burden of decisions that could shape the course of history. "How much time do we have left?" Rell's voice echoed slightly in the silence, a cutting edge beneath the calm. Thrax's voice, ever cold and calculated, sliced through the tension. "The pressure is mounting. Humanity has already established themselves in the neutral zone and are beginning to build a coalition. If we don't act soon, the balance will tip irreparably in their favor. They'll have more resources, more influence, and before long, their presence will be impossible to ignore." A sharp, metallic voice from a far corner of the room interrupted. "What about the disruptors? Have we considered the full effects of deploying them?" The speaker was Haroon, a tall and lean representative of the Solari, a species that had once thrived on the fringes of known space but now had a more secretive, shadowy influence. Haroon's eyes glittered with unspoken ambition, but their caution was palpable. They had never been quick to engage in large-scale confrontations. The Solari were all about quiet subversion, infiltrations, and careful machinations. Rell didn't respond right away. They knew the disruptors, the technology capable of erasing a species' ability to effectively communicate across vast distances, was dangerous, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. But the Solari weren't wrong. If there was any chance of slowing down the human advance, it would be a necessary evil. "We've tested them," Rell finally spoke, their voice low. "And the results are inconclusive. The disruptors could work, but they might also backfire, especially with humans. They're unpredictable, unlike the other species we've tested them on." "I don't see why we hesitate," Thrax interjected, stepping forward, voice hardening. "The longer we wait, the more humanity entrenches itself. We've watched them too long. We cannot afford to simply wait and see. If the disruptors are our best option, then we should strike." There was a murmur of agreement, but Rell remained still, watching the hologram of the neutral zone shift and pulse in front of them. The humans were expanding rapidly in all directions, their influence growing like wildfire. A small part of Rell still couldn't quite grasp it. How had a species so young, so unpredictable, come to dominate everything so quickly? But the larger, more logical part of them understood. This was no longer just about stopping them. This was about preventing something even worse. "I agree that we must act. But we need more than just disruptors. We need to break their will," Rell said firmly. "We have to make them question their entire purpose. They believe they're invincible, that nothing can stop them. But if we can show them how fragile they are—" A voice from the side interrupted again, this time from Asha, a respected strategist from the Xander, a species known for their meticulous analysis. "If you plan to break them, Rell, you must first understand them. Humanity is resilient. You know this better than anyone. They are not like the others. The more you push them, the more they will resist. We have to be careful. If we push too hard, we risk pushing them into the very corner we want them to avoid." Rell let out a breath. They were right. They knew that the humans' greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their resources, it was their unyielding will. Their persistence to survive, to conquer, to become what no one else could imagine. And that was exactly what made them so dangerous. "We can't afford to wait for them to become an unstoppable force," Rell said again, their voice softer now, tinged with frustration. "They've already infiltrated the power centers of the galaxy. They've stirred tensions, gained allies, and their influence is growing. The moment we wait too long will be the moment we lose. If we don't act decisively, we're giving them permission to rewrite the rules of this galaxy." The room went still, every eye focused on Rell. And for the first time, there was no hesitation. Everyone knew what needed to be done. It was a question of whether they would dare take the risk. "Do it," Thrax said coldly, eyes locking with Rell. "We have no other option." Rell nodded slowly, a sense of inevitability settling into their bones. The decision was made. A few days later, the fleet was ready. The vast armada of ships stood at the edge of the neutral zone, waiting for the signal to engage. Every leader in the galaxy had been notified, and the response had been swift. Some had pledged support, others had condemned the plan, but none had acted against it, not yet. The clock was ticking. In the control room, Rell stood before the holographic display, watching the fleet prepare for the mission. The disruptors, carefully placed in select locations on each ship, were the first line of attack. If all went according to plan, communication between human fleets would be severed, their ability to coordinate effectively crippled. But it wasn't the disruptors that Rell was worried about. It was the second phase of the plan. The real weapon, the one that would shake humanity to its core. Rell took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the console. They glanced back at Thrax, who stood silent and still in the background. The time had come. With one final motion, Rell initiated the signal. And everything shifted. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It wasn't the death of fleets or a blazing firestorm of destruction. No, the moment humanity would begin to understand their fragility wasn't in the chaos, it was in the silence. Communication from every ship, every colony, every starbase under the human banner flickered, then disappeared. The galaxy went dark. No messages. No transmissions. No response. The first signs of panic came almost immediately. Ships began to turn in on themselves, searching for answers, but finding none. Fleets collided as they tried to reroute with no central command to guide them. Human territory began to shrink, fractured by confusion and disarray. But as Rell stood there, watching the chaos unfold, something in them shifted. The plan was working. It was too late for humanity to reverse it. And yet, despite the victory, a sinking feeling crept into their chest. They had expected this. They had prepared for it. And yet, as the realization dawned that humanity was breaking, they also understood that in breaking them, they might have broken something within themselves, too. For Rell had always known, deep down, that the galaxy would never be the same again. What had been a well-organized, predictable system was now a void, filled with uncertainty. Even if humanity were crushed, it was the ripple effects that would haunt them all. The quiet hum of the command center buzzed in the background. Rell turned away from the screen, and for the first time, a quiet whisper echoed in the back of their mind. Perhaps humanity was not the enemy. Perhaps they were a mirror, reflecting back all the fears and weaknesses the galaxy had tried to hide. The war was far from over. And the true cost had only just begun.